GM everyone. I'm Titus. I'm the VP of Go-to-Market at Civic, where we empower developers with privacy-preserving tools for user and identity management. Our podcast dives into how digital identity is transforming industries at the intersection of Web 2 and Web 3. And before we begin, as always, don't forget to like, subscribe, follow us on your favorite platform. Your support makes a difference. Help us grow the podcast. Now, today, we have a special duo guest. We have Jessie, Santiago, and Dmitriy Ryajov of Codex. Today we're going to be talking about decentralized storage. I'm super excited about the topic. It's something I've been following for a long time. It's great to meet you guys. Jess, it's great to see you again after East Denver. Looking forward to exploring the future of decentralized storage, its role in Web3, how you guys came about to building this. So before we dive in, but how about you introduce yourselves to the audience? Let's start with you, Dmitry, and then we'll go to Jessie.
Yeah, absolutely. Hi, my name is Dmitry. I'm super happy to be here. So I've been in Web3 since probably around 2016. I participated in the IPFS project at the beginning, did some WP work there. Then I did a little bit of, before that I used to be just a software engineer for about 12 years or so. So I had plenty of experience in traditional industry, but I moved into decentralized and peer-to-peer tech around 2016. So I did a stint at MetaMask. We worked on something called Mustakala. Shout out to Herman and Kumavis, and we did something that it's probably very similar to the Portal network right now. And I'm not sure if you've heard of it. It's a CDN for Ethereum data, blockchain data, like the blocks history, the Ethereum state, things like that. And then I ended up working with Titus and building a libp2p for them in the new language. And that was shipped as part of the Beacon chain. And as part of that, we had conversations about decentralized storage and things like that. And then eventually we kind of ended up working on Codex. And that's been going on for about 3 years now. Yeah.
Good stuff. Jessie, how about you?
So I joined the space like late 2016 to early 2017. I actually got involved while I was still working as an electrical engineer doing power systems distribution. I actually started doing a podcast called the Bitcoin Podcast with a couple guys that I met online in a Slack channel. They were the hosts of the Bitcoin Podcast, and they were actually the ones who got me into doing podcasting. Which led to me eventually working in the space about 3 years ago. And then I joined up with Dmitry later on. I worked starting with Logos. So Logos is kind of the parent entity of all of the 3 infrastructure projects. Underneath it, Waku, Codex, and Nomos. We can talk a little bit about that during the podcast as well if you want to touch upon that. But yeah, I've been kind of on my periphery, involved with the space through the podcast. I've also kind of done some light Solidity, developer tutorials, some kind of educational content around that, as well as in being involved in alternate L1s at the time, as I guess we called them, when everybody was kind of labeling their projects as Ethereum killers back in 2017. Ran a lot of node infrastructure for different L1s. And yeah, I've just been kind of following mostly the Ethereum ecosystem. Bitcoin, after a few years, kind of got stale in terms of tech improvements. It kind of ossified. So yeah, I generally follow what looks interesting from a technical standpoint, and that's basically been how I got deeper and more involved with Logos and.
Awesome. Yeah, I remember those days in 2017. There were technical white papers coming out left and right. There was a lot of new tech that you could dive into and play with. So I feel like we want to bring that back in the cycle and kind of ignore the craziness around speculation and like pumps and dumps and all that crazy stuff that's happened in the past couple of cycles. So excited to talk to kind of people building in the trenches with the real and use cases and whatnot. So before we kind of dive into the project, I want to ask you, like, what is a Web3 take that you disagree with? Like, just kind of kicks things off.
I'll let you go first, Dmitry.
I guess I come at it from a storage perspective, since we're here. So one specific one that kind of bugs me a lot is that you can sort of build decentralized applications or a decentralized stack without decentralized storage, right? And we've been hearing a lot about like specific dApps or specific applications that are deemed to be decentralized that aren't, because one of the core pieces that need to be solved aren't, which is storage. And I come across those arguments very often, and it's that's one of those that I really like to fix, and yeah.
Cool. Jessie, your buddy.
For me, it's either meme coins or NFTs. It just depends on the day. I think meme coins, they were kind of cool for a bit, and then they were overdone, and they were taken into like a names and people doing kind of odd things in order to increase attention around whatever they were kind of trying to create, and not so positive a light. So yeah, I would say that's the one thing that I think from a storage protocol standpoint, it's just nice that we're actually developing infrastructure that's going to be necessary for not only NFTs to be stored in a way that is actually durable, and we'll get into what that means later in the podcast. But yeah, I think durable decentralized storage is a problem that hasn't yet been solved, and a lot of use cases or things that we think are as use cases can definitely benefit from this.
Yeah, so I completely agree. And I think, from my perspective, I think the Web3 take that I find amusing still is like this kind of decentralization claim, when you have both either your compute or your storage like on a cloud server. Essentially, if you're like running AWS or Google Cloud or Azure and you claim you're decentralized, that's still kind of a hot take in my book. But also decentralization is a spectrum. It's not like a either or. So there's like kind of waves of that, and that applies to identity, that applies to storage, that applies to compute, that applies to everything in our space. And I think we need to be more flexible as we're building these like client-facing, user-facing applications. Not everybody needs to learn how to operate CLIs and private keys and tooling like that. So as we bring more people into the space, we need to become more friendly towards like the pure technical people, non-cypherpunks. So cool. Enough about that. Let's talk about how you guys started Codex. Like, what was like an aha moment where you said like, yeah, we have to build this? Take me through that story.
All credit due to Dmitry. He'll tell you.
Yeah. So as I told you in the beginning, I was working on a light client implementation with MetaMask for Ethereum one. This was 2017, 2018. And I guess the lesson there was that one of the things that you hear or used to hear a lot about building the centralized storage was like, you build a peer-to-peer network and you put some data on it, and if you have a lot of nodes, then you're almost guaranteed that data is going to stay there. When we started building this solution, which relied on a peer-to-peer network, and we quickly realized that that's not the case. That's very that just doesn't happen in real world, right? And you always rely on kind of centralized or semi-centralized super nodes or something like that, but you can't really count on a myriad of tiny nodes and maybe even browser extensions and things of that nature that will cache some piece of data, and you're guaranteed it's going to stay there. So that was kind of like the direction that got me thinking around storage, what storage actually means, how would it be implemented in the decentralized setting, and that eventually led to the ideas and the intuitions behind Codex. Yep.
Good stuff. Jessie, anything you want to add?
No. 6 months to a year for me to really grasp what Dmitry was actually trying to solve, because this was actually my first foray into something that is like this deeply technical in terms of like an infrastructure project in the space. And until you know what the landscape looks like in terms of existing data storage solutions, you don't actually know how lacking it actually is. And over the past few years, we've kind of been reading white papers, been inspecting from a user perspective, and then also we are slowly now beginning to start to run storage provider nodes across all the DSNs, just so that we can give people perspective, right? Not only for ourselves, but also for people who are interested in wanting to, right? People may have thought, or maybe people still think, that storage is a solved problem, and it most certainly is not. So yeah, we'll be showing a lot of that research hopefully in the coming months. Yeah.
Awesome. I think that's the thing that I want to kind of help the audience understand myself as about like what you guys are building and decentralized storage in general, state of decentralized storage today. I think there's like, as I was saying earlier, spectrum between centralized, decentralized. In a way, like, I know an S3 could be considered like distributed storage, but it's still centralized around AWS itself. But then you have like other players in the space that have been working on this problem for some time now with various degrees of success. Like, how would you say like Codex compares to the existing landscape? Just kind of giving you an open question on that one.
Yeah, absolutely. So as Jessie was saying, when we started looking at the space, it was obvious that after a while, I mean, it wasn't immediately obvious. It's a very complex problem, and it takes a while to sort of sift through everything. But it became obvious that there wasn't a clear solution to, or even a clear answer to what reliable storage is in a decentralized setting, right? So we kind of started thinking about what is it that we're trying to solve? What is the actual problem? What does it take to? What are you actually looking for from a storage system in general, but from a decentralized storage in particular in this case? And even that question was kind of very muddy and hard to get through. But eventually, this is well defined in traditional storage systems. One of the properties that a storage system should have, it's durability, right? That's kind of like the main thing that you're looking for in any storage solution. And we could quickly realize that this was not very well understood or very well defined in both terms of how our systems build in towards providing you durability, right? There were different solutions prior to what we've built. And right now there's quite a few projects out there that are also working along the same lines, but it's still not clear exactly how are these projects guaranteeing you that your data is stored properly, right? How are these projects or how are these solutions in particular providing you guarantees that the data is actually being stored properly? So kind of roundabout thing here, but what we realized that there wasn't a solution that had everything that we were looking for, which was performant, which was durable, which was secure, and moreover, we kind of realized that a lot of these projects were just kind of hand waving and saying, yes, like this is going to work, but there's no real true understanding of how to build a system like this. That's how I'd put it.
Awesome. So I think you guys went live with the testnet. I'm curious to hear like what has the response been like? Like any surprising feedback from the community? What have been people doing with the testnet so far?
You want to take this one?
Yeah, absolutely. I think so. I think that the network has been growing organically. We haven't necessarily seen anything surprising or any surprising use cases. Maybe there were a few, but they might not be appropriate to bring up here. But what we realized is that we probably need to build more. So Codex is a very low level protocol. It's not meant necessarily to be used directly by a user. It requires, at the least a command line and interacting with it over curl and things like that. So it's definitely something that we expect developers to use directly and integrate with their applications and things like that. So what we realized, or at least my perspective on this, is that yes, we've been getting growth on the testnet, and people have been coming in and trying it out and uploading some data up there and kind of playing around with it. But what's evident is that we need more tooling. We need kind of more frictionless integration. There's some ideas that might be interesting where a developer might want to build some sort of an application and it's used to like using SQL or some key value store in the backend instead of some esoteric kind of storage protocol. So if we can abstract that away and just kind of offer Codex as a familiar interface, a familiar tool that developers are used to already, I think that lowers the barrier quite significantly and will hopefully increase the adoption. But I think this is a problem with most low-level protocols of this kind. That's just one way of kind of doing it. We're also thinking about integrating it with like probably backup software. I mean, there's plenty of backup software out there like ArcClone and Copia and stuff like that have different backends from S3 and Google Drive. So Codex could be one of those backends as well. But there's different ways of kind of lowering the barrier to entry and the scope that the way that users can actually interact with the protocol. Yeah.
Gotcha. I think from me, I think the biggest kind of pain point when it comes to decentralized storage, besides this durability part where it's pretty obvious you want to be able to retrieve your data on demand whenever you like, and not depend on some like availability, variability, right? Have that 99.99% uptime if possible, for the most part. The other thing is the ability to remove that data reliably from a network. And I think that's something that, like, because of the on-chain implications in many other networks, that's like a little complicated conversation that I found in analyzing these use cases in detail, and our technical team has found as well from an identity standpoint. Like, you can't really store PII and be GDPR compliant in most decentralized storage networks because you don't have a mechanism to remove that data reliably. Jessie, you and I talked about this over dinner at ETH Denver a little bit, and I want to kind of share a few of the kind of angles that you guys take with the audience here. Break down like this durability piece, the kind of incentive mechanics, and maybe how that contributes to like both storing the data and making it available, but also like disincentivizing to store that something is that the user no longer wants.
So I think, this is actually it's much harder than what it sounds. That's one of the reasons why it's probably absent from a lot of the solutions. There's several problems here that need to be addressed, right? So one of them is that you have a public network. where you publish some data that, but by definition that data becomes public. So the only way of protecting it is through encryption. So the data might be in the network, but it might not necessarily be accessible unless you have the private key to decrypt it, right? So deleting is important, but it's also very challenging in this kind of settings. So usually the solution is kind of encrypting the data, right? I'm not sure if this is a specific problem for certain industries and certain use cases. It probably is under certain circumstances. I'm not sure if the ID is one of them. I haven't really explored that part. But yeah, so like this type of networks, it's just technically challenging removing data because it just, it becomes public and everyone can have access to it. And it's actually a desirable property of the network that is the case. But that kind of puts things on its head, and then it does become hard to physically guarantee that the data has been removed, which is another aspect that needs to be, because someone can tell you, hey, yes, I got rid of it, but how do you prove that in a decentralized network? Right. So I think, like, to summarize, maybe I'm being a little bit all over the place, but just to summarize, it's quite a big technical challenge to physically remove data, scrape data out of this type of networks. It's just the reality of how they work. Just that as it is, I guess, in blockchain systems in general.
It's almost like you need like a proof of delete type of protocol.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and there's definitely some of that out there. I believe in research. It's been explored, but it's still really, really challenging. And it's not just one node proven that it's been deleted. It's the entire network proven that it's been deleted. And that's actually, I'm not even sure if it's possible.
Yeah, the reason I asked this is, I think, Jessie, you and I talked about this in kind of a different angle. It's like, why would people be incentivized to store data that they're not getting paid for? Like, once you stop paying for that,
Right.
up.
Right. Yeah, because the angle that we were talking about was in the context of when you take a file distribution protocol. That we were trying to solve is make the data stick around as long as you're paying for it. But contrary to, wanting to remove the data, as Dmitry mentioned, it becomes a really difficult problem when you're guaranteed that the data has been removed from the network. But that said, like we were talking, why would you want to store, somebody else's data if it's encrypted to a degree where, you have no chance of decrypting it now, but maybe in the future you might. So maybe that could be one reason why people would want to hold on to data. Yeah, I'm a member of like several, communities where people hoard data. So I can't say that, data hoarding isn't something I do in general. So yeah.
Yeah, I think it's one of those things, like, if you have almost like unlimited storage available in various methods, like either locally or in the cloud or distributed, it's like very easy to kind of keep storing data. I remember the day when like I had a 600 megabyte hard drive for my like games operating system, everything, and like you just have to let go of some things every now and then because there was no space.
There's a community. There's a community that I don't know if you guys remember. There was a video game back, I think in 2001. It released. It was called RuneScape, and there is a community that's still alive right now that is trying to piece together all of the old RuneScape game files for all of the assets and all of the binaries, so that they can reconstruct all of the updates. So that was, I'm actually thinking about reaching out to that community, see if they're interested in persisting the data on the Codex, because one of the problems that they had, which is exactly what you had a problem with, Titus, which is I ran out of hard drive space, which nowadays we can't even conceive of that because it's so cheap. But, if you want to be kind of like a podcasts about malware as well, you're going to want data to exist for a while. And so Codex can definitely be a solution to help those folks.
I mean, the other thing that I'm seeing like out there is like there's a sprawl of these like large language models that tend to occupy hundreds and hundreds of gigabytes, and I think we're close to like the terabyte mark for some of them. And I think like from a versioning perspective, there isn't really a good like long-term solution for that at this moment that I can see personally. Like I've worked with models in the past few years, and I've kind of seen them grow from a few gigabytes to tens of gigabytes to hundreds of gigabytes. I'm waiting for the first like few terabytes out there. I'm sure there probably are a few experiments on that late. But is that something like you guys are looking at as well? Is that something that's like interesting from a decentralized storage perspective?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's one of the with open source models. I think one of the challenge becomes how do you store this? Because you probably want something similar to maybe GitHub or something like that, where things are versioned and there's a historic record of all sorts of different models that have come out. But yeah, we're definitely looking at that use case, and I think Codex it's a great fit for that. And one of the things that could happen, for example, is that there could be a dApp that is allows you to store this type of information models and related data that is community supported, right? It's run on decentralized nodes. All the data is stored on Codex. There might be a DAO or some way where people contribute, and that then just kind of periodically pays for that storage on the network. Yeah, we've been definitely thinking about this type of use cases, and we've built a protocol to be able to accommodate all of them. What we're looking for right now, it's attracting developers and contributors that can take on that challenge, or it'll have to wait till we have the time to get to it. But yeah, it's definitely on the radar, and it's a very important one.
Yeah, makes all sense. Speaking of attracting developers and users, like what are your kind of approaches to doing that right now, or kind of some best practices that you're working on?
Yeah,
You want me to
so
take that?
Jessie can definitely probably speak a lot more to this because he's been doing the community part. But so from my part,
Yeah, I could.
what I can tell you is that just very briefly is that we, like I said, we're thinking about kind of lowering the barrier to entry for developers so that they don't necessarily have to deal with the low level of the protocol and all of that. But yeah, go ahead, Jesse. Sorry.
Yeah. So one of the obvious issues that we had, so for the past, I'll say this, for the past year, a little less than a year, we've been actively trying to push Codex in terms of the onboarding aspects and trying to get developers interested in terms of going through the documentation to see how they can build projects on top of Codex. Since last October, one of the biggest problems that developers have is port forwarding, surprisingly or unsurprisingly. And this issue is only kind of exacerbated by the fact that they don't even have control over their router. Sometimes they're in an apartment complex, or they're, for a hackathon, you're kind of in a building, like for instance, ETH Denver, we were all sharing kind of whatever that free Wi-Fi is by, I think, Eigenlayer. So you're in sometimes situations where you actually don't have control over, manually configuring your network. So in those cases, this is where strategic partnerships, especially with compute providers who do offer, some sort of light VPS instance that we can host Codex on, becomes very useful, because it makes the process very smooth in terms of spinning up a Codex node, using like WireGuard in order to, and deal with all the messy network configuration problems. So that's one way that we are kind of onboarding and also taking seriously the feedback we get from developers who are actually interested in building on Codex. And to the extent that we're still looking for interested participants for this hardware collaboration. We've kind of been building it slowly with a few different contact points with infrastructure providers. So we're talking with Risk Zero, Akash. We want to get different infrastructure projects that can utilize the underlying hardware where Codex may not utilize fully a lot of the hardware resources beyond the persistent storage. So case in point, I'm talking about with like some sort of NFT that converts to physical server hardware that's shipped to you, that you can sell the compute, whether it's GPUs or extra CPU cycles, to different compute infrastructure projects like Akash. Risk Zero also has need of GPUs for decentralizing their proving network. So there's a lot of training, inferencing, and all sorts of really interesting, in the deep-in category infrastructure protocols that we would love to collaborate with on this project. And it kind of benefits the whole ecosystem, because at the end of the day, the whole reason why we started building, peer-to-peer systems with the blockchain is because we wanted to not have, too many entities that have a monopoly over your data, that can kind of have backdoors to access the data, or, not be able to, access as needed to that data. Case in point is the Australian retirement fund. For I think a week or two, they didn't have access to their accounts because Google, I think, went down. And fortunately, they had two other backup providers who they were able to restore the data from. But yeah, you don't want those situations to happen. So from a onboarding developers and users standpoint, we're trying to be very holistic. So we have a Codex application that gives people a taste of a demo of how to use Codex with a nice front end. And then we also cater to developers with the VPS instances that we'll be spinning up soon. And then, yeah, from a strategic partnership, put hardware in people's homes, we are building up that collaboration with interested infrastructure protocols. So we definitely have like a very rounded approach in terms of how we want people to start, whether they're just, your aunt or your grandma who maybe doesn't even know or think that they actually need storage, but maybe they have some photos that they'd like to preserve, or some videos of when you were a little kid that you want to be around for your grandchildren to maybe see. Or yeah, so like it's kind of content like that, make it approachable from all different perspectives.
Yeah, because that's one of the things that I always ask myself when I see these like decentralized, especially like physical infrastructure applications, is like, is this a mom and pop thing, or do I need to kind of build my own micro data center that I can monetize it on this network? Like, is that good, the spectrum from that perspective?
Yeah, like a lot of the DSNs, they have, like, if you look at the major one, Filecoin, if you look at the hardware specs, they recommend 2 petabytes and a lot of server grade processors, a lot of like probably like 4 different servers in addition to 2 petabytes of storage, just to as like kind of entry point. And for Codex, we're hoping that it's not going to be nearly that resource intensive.
Yeah, in fact, we, like, just to jump in quickly, we designed the protocol to run on very limited hardware, maybe even at some point on a Raspberry Pi if you want that. But yeah, definitely keeping that in mind.
Yeah, for those watching that are wondering and haven't Googled it yet, the petabyte is 2 petabytes is 2,000 terabytes of data, which is 2 million gigabytes, which is not consumer grade by any means right now, at least for a few years. Probably wouldn't fit my garage well enough, or it would, but it would probably be a big chunk of the garage or the power consumption in my house.
Yep. I mean, there are some, I think, 18 or 20 terabyte hard drives now, but like you need a lot of those. Yes.
Oh, you
They
need
go up
100
to
of those.
24.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, so 100 hard drives just to kind of get into the network, plus the underlying kind of compute to keep those running, because you need to run something on them, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, that sounds more like an almost like small business to medium business infrastructure, because that's a significant cost to get started, right? For
Yes.
a network like that versus kind of starting from almost like consumer grade hardware, small hard drive. You allocate 100 gigabytes. Because I remember, like, I grew up with like DC++, right? Back in Eastern Europe, it was a thing. We would just connect to each other's computers, and like somebody would just like share their entire C hard drive, and like you would see the Windows in there, System 32, and like all the fun stuff, and my documents, and people would just like share that. Then there were like more savvy users that would just share a folder of specific files that they wanted to share. So like I think decentralized was, like, for me in my mind, that's pure decentralization. We just go peer to peer and connect with people, get like transfer files without any middle person or any
I
kind of
mean,
shit.
that is what Codex does as well. I mean, we do. I mean, Codex is completely decentralized peer-to-peer, right? So it'll do that for you as well. Yeah. But on top of that, it'll provide you with like strong guarantees that if you put data there, it'll stick there for the amount of time you want it.
Awesome.
One of the kind of the funny situations that's happening is a lot of people want to use Codex to upload small files, and Dmitry wants big files. I think.
Oh, you're muted. I think. What happened to your microphone?
And so we have to explain to people that
Something.
Yeah.
okay, yeah. So like a lot of people, when they try Codex for the first time, they think of it as a drop-in replacement for IPFS. And while it is very good, while it's very good at handling small files, we do want people to try the persistence mode when we make it available. Hopefully in the second half of this year, where we will definitely be running an incentivized testnet and kind of pushing people, and the documentation will be more towards running that mode.
Yep. Yeah, I mean, just to complement that a little bit, definitely the proven system or like the long-term storage or the storage system definitely has limitations that we were trying to work out. One of them is that the larger, like the smaller the file, the amount of proofs you need to produce is the same. So the smaller the file, you're paying exactly the same amount of money to sort of verify that file is there. Obviously, that economically that becomes less viable the smaller the file is. So we're working on mitigating that to some extent, but it should be possible to store any kind of any size file on top of Codex. Yeah.
Awesome. Yeah, because I mean those 500 gigabytes Olamas and all that stuff is not easy to store in regular situations. Let's put it that way.
Yeah, that's half your normal hard drive on a MacBook.
Exactly. Like I don't think I have it 503 gigabytes on my hard drive right now. I would have to clean it up to get there.
No matter how much I have on hard drive, it's always full.
No, you know what? You know what happens is like I connect like a Google Drive backup, and immediately I lose like a third of my hard drive space because like I have so much stuff stored in like cloud solutions and because I work there all the time. So anyway. Cool. So switching gears a little bit, I want to ask you kind of what was an unexpected challenge while building Codex? Like what's an like, oh crap moment that turned into like a win? Like any war stories like that you want to share?
Yeah, I mean, we have
So
those
many.
every other day. Like in a project like this, with this level of complexity, you're just constantly dealing with stuff you never thought you'd come across, right? Anything from our initial assumptions around how we're designing the systems turned out to be, not entirely wrong, but there were some gaps in them. We had to pivot a couple of times. I guess the win is that every time you kind of go down the rabbit hole in some maybe not completely the right direction, you still come out with learnings. Like specifically in our case, we got to explore a lot about specific storage solutions, how they've done it, and the literature around that, and we built up a lot of understanding, which is very useful. So I would say that probably those are the type of wins we're looking at right now.
Yeah, makes sense. Jesse, anything you want to add?
I think from a just, I guess I'll stick to kind of the community facing endeavors. When you're looking at launching an infrastructure, who are interested in running your protocol, running a node, but they'll ask, is it an incentivized testnet, and finding I guess crazy altruistic people who are awesome developers is one of the biggest problems. But when you do find them, they can be the biggest boon to your ecosystem, is what I've kind of realized. They really do. When you find somebody who is organically drawn to building on your project, they contribute in ways that you would not expect, in very, very large positive ways. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
No. So I'm curious from we've worked with a number of people that have had incentivized testnets, and then they got bot attack, denial of service attack. Have you guys seen any kind of attempts to do that? How did that go?
Not right now. Not maybe it's because the network is still quite small, and it's not incentivized just yet. It's just it's an open network, but we haven't seen any. Surprisingly, we haven't seen any real attacks. We haven't even necessarily seen any weird, or let's put it like that, inappropriate data being uploaded or anything like that. So it's been quite smooth, and Jessie will confirm this, but we've been getting pretty steady interest in the network and the protocol, and people coming in to the Discord and asking questions, and how do they run it, how do they try it, and we see nodes constantly increasing in the network, but it's definitely still very early stages, and maybe it's I don't know. I kind of see it. I'd like to see a DDoS on the network, because that would mean that there's quite a lot of interest. So I'm kind of waiting for that. So
hackers, hear that?
Yeah, go for it.
They want it. No, but seriously, I feel like I need to plug in Civic here a little bit. If you guys ever need to do a proof of humanity on the incentivized testnet, don't hesitate to reach out.
Oh, that's amazing.
To try to
okay.
From that perspective. So that's my shameless plug here. So those things where when you're giving out rewards, you want to make sure you're giving that to real people and not just kind of people replicating themselves.
Yep, that's important. That we were definitely talking about it, and we haven't started looking at solutions yet, but it's great to know that you guys have that.
Yeah. So I know we're a bit over the allocated time, so I appreciate you guys bearing with me. This is a super interesting conversation, and we have a bunch of people watching us live, so happy to kind of continue jiving here. I want to look forward into the future a little bit. Where do you guys see decentralized storage going, tooling going in the next 5 years? What are kind of the changes that need to happen to make this, to increase adoption, to get this more into more people's hands?
Right. Yeah, I think this is actually a very fascinating question, because I think that in the next 5 years, very likely we'll see an explosion in storage requirements, storage need, right? I think everyone, if you look at the last couple of years, there's been a lot of work around infrastructure, kind of decoupling some of the pieces in a blockchain architecture, decoupling some of the layers, and to gain some efficiency, L2s, sharding in some cases. And we've seen projects like Mina, which use ZKs to essentially not have any sort of history or but one of the problems is that you might be able to eliminate data from some of these layers, but you're not going to be able to eliminate it from the protocol itself, like from maybe not from the protocol, maybe that's the wrong way of saying it, but you still need data. You still need access to historical state to some extent. You still need to store potentially a very large amount of data related to dApps and transactions and whatnot. So I think as we see blockchains and kind of modularizing more in these layers, getting more and more decoupled, this data needs are going to be pushed out of the protocol itself, and the need for external solutions for data is going to increase. So that's just from that perspective. And another point I think is that the tooling, the way that you can actually use this type of things, how practical they are, like how practical storage protocols are right now, it's a far cry from what a developer expects from like a traditional Web2 stack. And I think that's another important aspect that will continue to improve and will probably get to a point where it's going to be seamless, and probably a developer wouldn't necessarily have to worry about whether it's storing it on AWS or using something like Codex, and whether it's decentralized or centralized. It might not even care about it. It might just be looking at the price. But the experience is so simple that it just makes sense to use it. But obviously, if you use Codex and similar technologies, you're gaining a whole lot more behind the scenes, right? So you're immediately have a lot of power. So I think that's another kind of angle that's emerging. And I think that once those two, the platforms that we're building, blockchains, the execution layers that we're building, they become as performant and as efficient as we think they can be, we'll see, a migration of traditional applications onto like the Web3 ecosystem. Twitter will already see Farcaster and similar things pop up, but they're still, as you said, it's a centralization is a spectrum, and in that spectrum they're still not as decentralized as some of us would like them to be. So as these barriers start to diminish or disappear, I think the floodgates are going to open, and you're going to get first of all, a lot of usage, a lot of this application is kind of migrating over to, and I mean Twitter, etc., or just new versions of them popping up, very likely, and then that'll drive data usage tremendously. So my perspective here is that data in Web3 is going to, at some point, there's going to be a breaking point, and it's just going to start increasing because the tooling and the platforms are going to get to a point where they allow for that, or they actually require in terms of like data generation, and because they now allow all of these different use cases. Anyways, I'll stop there.
Yeah, I took a quick look at the hyperscalers, and I didn't realize that they've been slowing down their purchases of hard drives. I didn't know that. And as you kind of everybody is aware, all of the training data for the foundational models for that are requiring massive amounts of compute. If you talk to Greg from Akash, he'll say that OpenAI is hunting for GPUs, and everybody who is doing centralized AI training is hitting limits that are maybe not even compute related, but maybe energy related. And so where do you go? You have to do distributed training, and maybe it's not the fastest, and maybe it's not the most efficient right now. But when your bucket is full, you need to find more buckets, and those are buckets that are still distributed training, distributed inferencing, where scalers, don't have as much storage capacity as, the data demand is going to continue to grow, to potentially exceed. So you'll probably find that in homes where, somebody may have a laptop that has, a terabyte of storage and 500 gigabytes is not utilized. It might not be a lot of money, but for them to, run it, turn it on, and sell that storage to, a storage protocol, it might add up to be something substantial, for smaller companies who are, may not be willing to pay the price of whatever the privacy costs or the whatever costs that, or like trade-offs that you kind of gain, but and then others you lose, doing things in a kind of a more decentralized manner with a blockchain, super geographically distributed. Though I know how they're structured, and so yeah,
that makes sense. I think the only thing I would add here is I think that we are at the tipping point when it comes to data creation and then storage needs, like because also AI agent prevalence.
Oh yeah,
as you're creating like a flurry of agents everywhere, those require kind of a trail, right? Like a state trail, if anything, if not an audit trail, as they kind of move through chain systems and whatnot. And we're also seeing like more and more chains protocols like try to kind of do things where you anchor some off-chain metadata on-chain, but like you don't actually store the data on-chain anymore because it's becoming prohibitively expensive. Like we all remember the Ethereum days where like it cost $100 to spin up a wallet when the network was clogged. So I think that definitely will increase in prevalence. And I see also like a world where we do more kind of logging and long-term logging as opposed to kind of short-term logging and just like destroying those databases as we move forward, because like the storage limitations, like if you have more accessible storage, then you can like have more data available also for security purposes, for audit purposes, but also training data purposes as well. Because I think like the AI like entities, agents, whatever people spin up programs, solutions, they need the training, they need the inference, but they also need the storage for this like auditability and like continuous learning and whatnot.
Just even think about the fact that robotics hasn't really benefited the same way that kind of knowledge work has benefited from these LLMs, like NVIDIA's Cosmos and Omniverse stack. That's going to be like, if you've ever used ROS and Gazebo for simulating and like for simulating different environments for different robots, whether it's a quadcopter, a terrestrial, Omni. There's if you think text-based, natural language processed, data that's ingested to train these foundational models is a lot, just wait until the synthetic data comes out of Cosmos. Like that's going to be ginormous. Or like, sensor networks, like, some of the projects in our industry, Demo and IoTex, there's so many. And like that data, they're going to want to store it. And so data needs are only going to be exponentially increasing as we want more efficiency out of more than just software improvements in our lives. We want physical improvements. Well, that's going to come at a cost, and it's going to be a significant data cost.
Awesome. Cool. So as we're getting to the top of the hour, what's next for Codex? What should people pay attention to? Where should they follow you? What's kind of like the rundown there?
Codex.storage. There's a big button, join testnet. If you click that, you'll go to the Codex Discord server, and then if you find the join testnet channel, you join that. You'll see different steps that open up under a basically run a Codex node channel category. And if you run through those, you can get started. And if you ask us any questions you might run into, we're always there. We're pretty much terminally online, so somebody will be able to help you. Yeah.
You can also check out our GitHub, I guess, GitHub/Codex-storage. That's our org. You'll find a bunch of repos there. You can probably look at we have an SDK, JavaScript SDK right now. It's under a repo. Just search for SDK. That's right. I'm not sure where to share the links. Maybe maybe we can put them out there somehow. And yeah, definitely visit our main repo, which is neem-codex under the Codex storage org and GitHub.
Right, so let me add the link in here so people can see it. There you go.
Nice.
Check it out,
so
guys.
I put the link to the website as well as the GitHub repo for the JavaScript SDK Dmitriy was talking about.
So yeah, we can share that
then as well. There it is. Both links are up. Check it out, guys. It's been an amazing conversation. Like for me, I think storage is one of those like capstone problems, like between compute and like inference and like all these like bandwidth. I think like storage is a fundamental thing that we take for granted, rely on every day, and we like just expect it works. And there's so much work that goes into that. Like between like I don't know the early hard drives and like the early infrastructure to like the cloud that we now take for granted, where we have terabytes and terabytes of data available, to like now the future of decentralized networks with even more availability, more security, encryption, and distributed networks. I'm super excited where this is going. So thank you, Dmitry. Thank you, Jessie, for coming on to the pod. As always, like thank you everyone that tuned in. Hope you enjoyed the episode. Don't forget to like, subscribe, follow us on your favorite platform. Helps us bring you more great content. And don't forget to check out civic.com and learn more about what we do. Over and out.